There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. I don't know why. Where I used to look so that it would look like I'm looking at you doesn't work anymore. They've changed something, or I'm just an idiot. So I'm looking at the bottom of my screen, and that seems to be where I can make eye contact with yous. I've had an interesting reading week. Not necessarily an excellent one. I'll get into it. And I had a fabulous weekend that didn't involve a whole lot of reading because Kenji and I had company. My cousin Lindsay, who those of you who are long-timers might remember fondly, hopefully fondly, was my cousin who lived in Tokyo the same time I did, and she made an appearance on several videos back in the day. Her mum is my first cousin, so Lindsay and her parents came to Saskatoon for the weekend, and Lindsay stayed with Kenji and I. We had a lovely time, and they had originally planned to come the weekend of my birthday, but the weather did not permit. And so I got a lovely big birthday present from them this weekend. 3 bottles of my favorite wine, and if you don't know what my favorite wine is, it's Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. 3 different kinds, none of which I'd tried before, and a set of wine glasses, stemless wine glasses that you could use for any kind of cocktail or anything really, that have bookish things written on them and gold-tipped edges. They're lovely, and some homoerotic things, plastic tabs you put on the side of the glass so you can remember whose belongs to who, and they're all homoerotic little shirtless men or something. It was just couldn't have been more perfectly a Sean gift. So, all right, let's get into my reading week. I have finished 2 books. I'm going to do a preliminary check-in on another one, and then I'm going to show you a whole pile of books I'm starting, and then I'm going to do a 5-book haul. I'll talk about these 2 in the order in which I finished them. I finished the book that I was reading to Mary Jean, a British debut novel called The Way the Day Breaks by David Roberts. And you may remember that this was a book that I was yearning to read, but couldn't make a space for it because it wasn't going to fit into the kind of books that I buddy read with my buddy readers, and wouldn't fit for a readathon. And it took me 2 years, I think, to just say, I'm going to read this, and I read it to Mary Jean, so that's how I made it fit. And we enjoyed this. I am confused a little bit about it, but I really liked it, and I think I have maybe not going to give it a star rating for a while because I may end up loving it the more I kind of dwell on it. But boy, what a beautifully written and satisfyingly mystifying book. I would put it that way. But I'm not yet able to say that I loved it. I sure was deeply engaged by it. So it's set in Yorkshire in the late 1980s, and about half of it is in dialogue without any attribution. There's no quotation marks, there's no he said, or you're reading it like a script with no characters' names. I could imagine it being performed on stage. And that is on car trips, coming home from holidays in France, or conversations in the house of this family. And the dad is in every one of the conversations. And he is a dreamer. And his wife, his long-suffering wife, and his children who are... The youngest son is Michael, and he's 8. There's 3 or 4 other kids older than that. And they all go along with or tease their dad about the crazy ideas. The first idea that we read about is he wants to start a new religion for the tax benefits. And he hopes that one of his kids will dig a pond in the backyard, and that will be the focus of the pilgrimage that the followers might make. And there's not going to be any policies or any theology to it. It's just going to be some kind of a cultish religion, and they'll get rich and save money on taxes. It just doesn't make any sense. And so his wife and his kids are all like, Dad, Sinclair, his wife, we kept saying, and more of that, new ideas. His wife leaves him alone at the house after the holiday, and he buys the spitting image of his jalopy that he's driving just for parts, and which doesn't really make sense, especially how much he paid for it. Those are 2 examples. I won't give you any more, but he's just a little bit off in a way that his family just rolls their eyes, and so does the reader. But as it goes on, you realize that the father is actually becoming increasingly mentally ill. So that's that part of the story. There are also sections written in retrospect by the son, Michael, as an adult, and what he remembers. And they are, for the most part, really interesting as well. And then we get other voices later on. There's a Christmas letter that the wife is writing and editing, and you see all her crossing out and editing of this Christmas letter as she writes about the fact that her husband is now institutionalized. I found it all deeply engaging. I didn't quite get how it all hung together or if it hung together for me. But in this case, unlike the one I'm about to tell you about next, if there was a flaw, it was in my reading. I didn't feel like it went over my head. I just felt like it's not quite a Sean book, but it's a beautiful book that a lot of other readers would resonate with more deeply than I did, but I'm still puzzling over it. It's published by Weatherglass Books, and that I didn't know until a few hours ago. It was created by former booktuber, oh, for God's sakes, I've forgotten his name. I'll put it in here, but he's also one of the co-founders of the Republic of Consciousness Prize and Weatherglass Books. His name has gone out of my head, so that's the kind of Friday reads it's going to be. So do I recommend it? Yeah. Do a Kindle sample of the prose. I think that's going to suck you in, and many a reader might respond to the kind of fragmentary structure of it in a way that would not be as confused as my response was. The other book I finished this week is the Australian novella The Sitter by Angela O'Keeffe. I raved about this last week, and I'm very sad to say that the second half of it was awful. I haven't found anybody else out there on the internet that shares my opinion, but my opinion is right, and they're all wrong, because it just went off the rails completely. I was so disappointed. You can see how many tabs I had, and I stopped tapping at about the 50% mark because it just started failing utterly. There's a ghost or an ethereal version of Hortense Cézanne, the wife and painterly subject of the painter Cézanne, and she comes to life and has this kind of symbiotic relationship with the Australian woman who's writing a biography of her, and they're in Paris, and it's the beginning of COVID. And there were so many absolutely fascinating things that premise allowed to be expressed, if I can put it that way, about the biographer and her subject, the author and her subject, 6 characters in search of an author. All of these things just came up in such a fresh, spirited way. And I did say spirited, not spiritual. Being gazed upon. Hortense Cézanne was the subject of many of Cézanne's paintings, including this one, and it was her time in her very busy, tough life of a woman in the late 19th, early 20th century that while sitting for the portraits, she could just let her thoughts wander, and she could just daydream, but that inevitably made her move, and Cézanne would get mad. In this novel, Hortense gazes upon her husband, and we get a portrait of her husband, and the communication between the biographer, the Australian biographer, and Hortense was absolutely fascinating. I'll read you the word spendthrift comes up, and then this is in the voice of Hortense. Spendthrift. I like the feel of the word, the thud of it on my tongue, a word I could not have known back then. A word from the writer's own tongue. It has landed on mine now, a kind of kiss. This is how she worked on the book. This is how I gave her what she didn't know she wanted. She reached out, and I carried her reaching outness inside me. I carried it, growing fat. Just some gorgeous writing. So I was so immersed in it, and then we get to the second half, which is where the tables are turned. The 2 women, the ghost and her biographer, witness a tragic traffic accident which triggers something in the biographer, and she strikes out. She abandons the manuscript of her novel based on the life of Madame Cézanne and starts writing something much more personal. It's autobiographical, but she makes it fiction. And at first, Hortense feels snubbed or neglected, but then she gets invested in sneakily reading it while the biographer slept. And that's where the novel turned in a way that just didn't work for me at all. The story she told, even though there's elements of it that I relate to personally, it's about giving up a baby for adoption. The adoption story is something that speaks to me. And it's about the death of a father, something else that speaks to me. It was so banal and boring because Hortense suddenly was gone. She does make a few more appearances, but the primary focus of the second half is this kind of humdrum story that just read so flat and mundane to me that I was crushed and I almost bailed. I got to the end, and like I say, I'm the only reader I know of who had that reaction to the second half, but I had wished to hell writers would just choose one story and write it well and stop trying to yoke two stories together because it almost never works. And for this particular reader, it didn't work here. I still recommend it for the first half, and I know Lindy enjoyed it, Mark Nash enjoyed it, so there's lots of other reviews that are more positive, but if you are interested in the way that ghost and that symbiotic relationship opened up worlds of writer and artist and text and image and gaze, you wouldn't regret reading the first half. But if you're like me, you might not enjoy the second half, because very disappointingly, I did not. All right, I'm a few pages into Landscapes by Christine Lai. I'm reading this to Mary Jean, and we are just immersed in it. It's set on the barren English countryside in the near future, and there's all kinds of, I think, climate change related emergencies and migrations and refugees and stuff. And this property that belongs to the main character's husband, I think they're married. It's been in their family. Mornington, it's a grand, old, stately English home, but it's falling apart. They've sold it, and she's making an archive of the art. And she actually came to that family in that house because of her interest in the art, including Turner, the landscape artist, J.M.W. Turner. It's delicious. That's all I'm going to say about it for now, but starting out just wonderfully. Okay, I'm not going to talk about any of these very much, but I am starting 5 books. I forgot to say that this novel was for the Ben Reads Good Challenge. Read a book by an Australian author. The one for March is read a book that was adapted into a movie that was nominated or won an Academy Award, and I went through my entire library and had so much fun, and I don't know if I would have ever read this book otherwise, so that's the kind of book that I want to do for the Ben Reads Good Book Challenge. Gigi by Colette, which, who knew, was made into a movie that won, I think it swept the Academy Awards the year that it was made. Oh, this is actually 2 novellas in one, Gigi and the Cat. So I'll read them both. The Gigi is translated by Roger Senhouse, and The Cat is translated by Antonia White, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But that's going to be my Ben Reads Good book for March. All of these were in my book haul last week, so I'm just going to hold them up. I'm going to get started on Irish reading for Irish Lit Month. This debut novel that I think is also queer, Garrett Carr's The Boy from the Sea. This is going to be a buddy read with Sonia, of an enthusiastic reader. Gráinne Murphy's penultimate novel, Winter People, that is going to be a pseudo-buddy read with Ellen, one of my wonderful top-tier patrons from New Zealand. Oh, I'm not going to start this week, but I'll just hold it up anyway. In a week or two, I'm going to start the next buddy read with my wonderful top-tier patron and loyal commenter, Paul, of this queer Irish novel that's been brought back into print by McNally, The Pilgrimage by John Broderick. And I kind of forgot, it's also Llewellyn, the Welsh reading month in March. So I always had it in my head that's in April, but it's in March. And so I had thought months back that when Llewellyn came around again, this is the book. If I only had time to do one, it had to be this one, because this is a classic from 1951. Richard Llewellyn's How Green Was My Valley. And I found out that it's on Audible, so I'm definitely going to do it as an audio-text combo, and I'm going to hopefully absolutely love this. All right. I'm doing 5 books for my book haul just because. The first one came out last year, and it's an author I'd heard a little bit about over the years, but not much. Don't even know what country he's from. Oh, Pittsburgh, Boston, American. Evensong by Stuart Onan. But this is a novel about old people. The Humpty Dumpty Club, a group of women of a certain age who band together to help one another and their circle of friends in Pittsburgh. Oh my God, that sounds right up my street. You'll probably read it to Mum. First 2 paragraphs. We need to keep in mind that the title of the first chapter is The Humpty Dumpty Club, because it's referred to in the opening sentences here. It was their nightmare, right there in the name. A shattering fall, not from the battlements of a castle, but headlong down a flight of stairs. Joan Hargrove, their wise, organized leader, queen of the highlighter and color-coded file folder, bringing her accounting skills to bear on the club's every move. They'd never had another president. Thursday, she hadn't shown up for bridge at Emily's. No surprise. They all knew she'd been battling a stubborn summer cold she brought back from Chautauqua. Susie had just run her over some butternut squash bisque from the co-op. And Joan had seemed fine, a little tired, still in her bathrobe and slippers, carrying around a box of tissues. Why she had decided to take her trash down to the garage that night was a mystery none of them could fathom, though both Kitsy and Emily were just as fastidious. City of Pittsburgh pickup wasn't until Monday, and if the kitchen can was full, she could have asked Susie. She'd lain there through the morning, her tabby Oscar mulling, confused. Next is a Saskatchewan novel by a Métis writer, and I previewed this, spoiler alert, I've been working for about 5 months on my autumn 2025 library book vlog. I just don't seem to have enough time to do that anymore. I don't know why. I will get it to you eventually, but they're probably going to come out at the rate of once a year now. I just can't. I guess I'm slowing down in my old age. But anyway, that's how I found out about Saltus by Tara Giraud. And it was the top pick of the books I sampled for that video that you will see sometime this year. It's set in the early 90s. It's, I think, a fictional small prairie town called Saltus. 2 waitresses. Lots about ranching. One of them, the 2 waitresses, Trish and Lenore. It's Lenore who's pushing 50 and has never come to terms with her identity as an adoptee and feels very disconnected from her Métis heritage. And I loved the way it opened. Opening paragraph. June 1992. Beauville, Manitoba. The cattle are all that's noticeable on the landscape. The darkness is still so rich it mutes everything else around them, and they stand in stark contrast. Scattered on the other side of the fence, some of them lie on the ground. Others stand in small groups, clusters here and there. Massive and imposing, even the calves, at just over 3 months old, already weigh 200 pounds. The sheer size of them makes Al feel compact, contained, like he takes up no more space than he's supposed to. And this is an earlier novel by the queer Australian-Canadian novelist Bradley Somer, who I interviewed. He was my mystery guest, and then I did the book launch in Saskatoon for his most recent novel, We Are All of Us Left Behind. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. This is Fishbowl. I think Lindy read and enjoyed it, and I got it and got him to sign it the night of his book launch. And this is about a goldfish who escapes from his bowl and falls down to the ground outside. And it's what happens after that. 2015 novel. Opening lines. Chapter 1 is called In Which the Essence of Life and Everything Else is Illuminated. There's a box that contains life and everything else. This is not a figurative box of lore. It's not a box of paper sheets that have been captured, bound, and filled with the inkings of faith, chronicling the foibles and contradictions of the human species. It doesn't sport the musty smell of ancient wisdom and moldering paper. It isn't a microscopic box of C, G, A, or T, residing within cell walls and containing traces of everything that ever lived, from today back through the astral dust of the Big Bang itself, to whatever existed before time began. It can't be spliced or recombined or subjected to therapy. It's not the work of any god or the evolution of Darwin. It's not 1,000 other ideas, however concrete or abstract they may be, that could fill the pages of this book. It's not one of these things, but it's all of them combined and more. Next is a book from the British Library Women Writers series, Lady Living Alone by Nora Lofts, originally published in 1945, with an afterword by Simon Thomas, who was a recent guest on my channel. That video continues to get hit after hit, so I'm definitely going to be inviting him back. Nora Lofts, I'd never heard of her, 1904 to 1983. It starts out as a domestic novel, but evolves into a dramatic thriller. I don't mind thrillers. I hate mysteries passionately, but thrillers, depending on the balance between story, character building, and thrillery aspects, might work for me. The first paragraph is really long, and I can't immediately see where to break it up, so I'm just not going to give it to you. And the last one in my book haul is a book that's gotten a fair amount of attention since it came out last year, Muckelfluga by Michael Peterson. And I know that Angelia of Read and Reread buddy read this with another booktuber whose name I don't have in my head. I haven't heard a report on it, but I probably missed a video or two. The author lives in Edinburgh. He's also written a book called Boyfriends, but yet I don't think he's gay. I don't know. I'm curious about it, and I'll find out more about it later. It's set on a remote island. First two opening short paragraphs. Muckelfluga, that is the main massing of the original stone living quarters, could be said to display a Gothic splendor, were it possible to ignore the wounds thrashed upon it by the tyrannical ocean swarming around its outer rocks. Despite being its most devoted and only inhabitants, Us and the father, in their grief, have taken to regarding these buildings as the place relatives once lived in, rather than their very own home. The father's name is not on any deeds, nor Us's either. Yet there's more of the father's blood seasoning the soil than some who died here, and the memory of the mother is kilted into the sky. Well, that last sentence just grabbed me. Let's hear it again. Yet there's more of the father's blood seasoning the soil than some who died here, and the memory of the mother is kilted into the sky. Oh my God! All right, that's my book haul. Thanks so much for watching.